for having me around today. And I wanted to use this time slot that we have allocated for a conversation today into talking on this topic very near and dear nowadays to my heart. I've been a manager now for 2.5 months, so I am a fairly new manager. I've been a tester in various organizations for the last 25 years. And as a tester, over the years, what I've learned is kind of like as you mature, as your perspectives get bigger and bigger, you move from kind of just testing products and finding bugs in products. You move into testing people and their patients, definitely, but you also move into testing processes and the ways that organizations work. And now I'm kind of fascinated with this experiment of being a manager. This is a second time that I'm a manager in my career. I usually have enjoyed the hands-on testing role a lot more, but I have had this idea for myself where I can always make a tester's job basically unrecognizable by tailoring the job, crafting the job into the job that I want and can contribute the best out of myself in. So I can do the very same for manager job, and I have still managed so far in these 2.5 months to do at least a day of testing every single week. And I find that figuring out how do we get testing to work in software development teams, it's very near and dear to my heart. As a manager right now, I'm responsible for 2 main teams. One of them is what I would call modern team, modern testing, modern development. Both teams are agile teams in that sense, but only one of them is very modern. And the modern comes with this idea that one of my teams really has results a little bit like this. So this is a tale of one, and well, comparing to the next team that I'm also working with, looking at their results and what we've come to right now in the more modern of the 2 teams. So over the last year, we've moved from a 27-day from decision to release to having a release to now having 19 minutes from decision to release to having a release available, basically by continuously doing all of those activities that you would need in order to have a release available. So you have always a working system that you can just decide to package, and that's how you make a release. We have some so-called manual testing related documentation. Those 13 reusable test charters for us, they are reusable charters in the sense that they describe the 13 main features, main values that the system is supposed to be providing for our users. So they are kind of like a reminder of the types of functionalities that we are supporting right now, and some ideas collected to how we would remember to go through those. We put them into manual test documentation, but most of the test documentation that this modern team creates is that whenever we have an idea of a thing we would like to test, the best investment for us, that's how we believe, is that we write it down as we have explored, we have discovered some new information, we've realized that our tests are currently maybe missing that aspect. We're putting it into our set of programmatic tests. And we have now, well, I took the recent numbers, close to 2,000 programmatic tests, which we run in our pipelines. Pipeline run takes about 10 minutes. Into results that we get in the scale of 50,000 a day. So unless these were running kind of like mostly green, almost always green, reliably green, the style of development that we're doing, the style of testing that we're doing couldn't be progressing. So we are really relying on not analyzing those results, but just looking at kind of like, all green, all green, all green, all green, and that's how the work goes. This is probably still kind of like normal and modern, but we also have some unusual aspects to this team on how we do this more modern testing. One is that we don't write bug reports. So if we write a bug report, it usually starts with a conversation. So you would probably call, as a tester in the team, you would probably call a developer and say, can I show you what I'm thinking might be wrong with the system. And most likely out of that session, usually in half an hour, a few hours after that, or even within that immediate session, you, instead of having a bug report, would have a pull request that fixes the problem that you have together worked on with the developer. And there would usually also be additional test cases that help you kind of like fix and forget, keep it in around and not have to spend energy thinking about it. We have a 0 bugs policy, meaning that if I see something that bothers me as a tester, I will ping the developers immediately, and we will address bugs as they are found. And they, of course, the developers do that to one another. So it's not just testers finding bugs, but it's the entire team kind of like doing this kind of service of testing for the others in the team. And following this 0 bugs policy. So instead of having like a minefield where you have to remember that, oh, I'm not reporting that, I'm not reporting that, I'm not reporting that, the things get fixed so that we think it's the best we can do, and we don't have to kind of like avoid all of the things that have been reported and decided not to fix, which helps us also kind of move faster and have this courage of, you know, raising up all of the conversations we need to have. And yet with all of this style, which is very automation centric, I would call this exploratory testing primarily and almost completely. The way we do testing is exploratory testing. It is what I would call contemporary exploratory testing, so the most modern way of doing exploratory testing. And contemporary in this means that in order for you to explore well, you actually have to have automation that helps you explore the things that you can kind of like get your tentacles, your knowledge of things that used to work updated fairly frequently and very easily. And yet, even if you have this network that kind of helps you keep tabs of all the things that used to work that might now be broken, still maybe 10% of the testing that gets done is automated. So this is kind of what a modern team does. It has taken us about a year to get to this stage. And looking at the other team, the neighbor of it, there is very clearly a coaching journey to get to this kind of state. And that's what I kind of wanted to open up for you in the talk today a little bit. The other team, the red boxes there on my slide, the other team asks usually these kind of questions where they ask, like, how can you test when you actually have no dedicated testers? Having a manager who is now sometimes testing and sometimes not testing, and the team is generally taking care of the testing themselves. It doesn't sound like we are anymore investing in testing as such. But then again, we have all developers testing, but it's still too important to be just left for the developers only. It's also too important to be left just for the testers. And we need this kind of like a mix of team members with emphasis centering of testing and team members with maybe a center in figuring out the ways to automate some of the problems that we want to automate with the systems that we are creating. And the other one there being then that the developers, they get, it's kind of funny when they speak about this, like I speak about it, it's, a tester is speaking to other testers and saying that developers actually can test. It usually is easier understood and even accepted maybe. But sometimes I have had my developers deliver similar talks saying that they have no testers, they are just taking care of the testing amongst themselves. And usually even when they're on the stage telling that they absolutely love to test and they want to test and they have all these tests that they have created and they have learned so much about testing and they want to learn so much more, they're often still told that they can test and they don't really want to, even if they even want to go on a stage to share to other developers and other testers the story that they do want and they are definitely capable of that. So a lot of this stuff around the modern perspective is that we have certain beliefs in the testing community where we believe that there's a certain organization of work that we need to have and certain processes that we need to have in order for us to be really good. And my experience with more modern, faster working teams is that some of these essential belief systems on how we think things must work need to be broken down. The extensive use of Jira, we don't use any of Jira. We have conversation-based work, and definitely developers can and do want to test. So in order for me to kind of explain this contemporary exploratory testing, what I usually try to do is to say that to put together contemporary exploratory testing, we kind of approach this testing from two angles. There's this more of a traditional way of thinking about testing, which is still an essential part of how we think and frame testing, which is that we think of testing as creating artifacts. So in the past, we used to think about creating manual test cases. We would write and document manual test cases. But nowadays, with the same time and same energy that we could use in fine-tuning our manual test cases, the investment that these more modern teams have been choosing to do on artifact creation side is to put all of that as much as possible into automation and have a growing asset that is around and will help us do more and more over time as long as we keep growing it. It gives us particular things in software development. It gives us, before we implement things, it gives us a specification. If we give good examples of what we are supposed to be building, we're likely building the more right thing. It gives us feedback when we're building things like, did we build what we were thinking we were, agreeing? It gives us that kind of like a feedback cycle. When it's around later, it gives us regression, which is a great value of kind of like having our intent, the things we intended to build in, being monitored for kind of future perseverance. Are they still around later on? And when it fails, especially when it is kind of like done on the lowest possible level that you can get that feedback on, it is the fastest possible, but it's also most granular feedback on what is the thing that is changing unintentionally, and then helping us kind of effectively, because of the granularity of the feedback, effectively giving us feedback that tells us what needs to be different, what was the accident, what was the misunderstanding, what was the thing we forgot when we get that feedback in a kind of like lower scale, smaller scale tests. So all of these things are things that generally automation gives us, but also in the traditional testing world, when we didn't have so much automation yet, the manual test cases were serving very similar purposes on that space. On the other side of this kind of like pushing together the contemporary exploratory testing, on the other side is this idea of testing as performance, kind of like you look at an application and it's almost as if it was talking to you. It whispers back to you. It says like, oh, you'd like to click here, don't just click once, click many times. Maybe be a little bit impatient, maybe refresh already before you go forward. And kind of like things that the application does, it's almost like as if you were dancing with the application, kind of listening to the cues that it gives you, and trying things that come to your mind from the extensive experience of having used various applications, and wanting to see that things could be broken, things could be somehow needing attention, and there's some information to bring about. So this kind of testing, it usually gives us guidance. It gives us kind of like the direction of, are we seemingly going in a good direction? It's not so binary. It's not kind of like yes or no, but it's more of like, it's more of this better. Does it feel better today than last time? Does it feel worse? But it's also giving us a deeper understanding and models and then accidents, positive accidents, serendipity of finding problems that are, nobody would plan on putting them there, but still kind of combining all the things that you need in order to have working software. The interactions sometimes create impacts that you really didn't intend. So you have both of these sides coming together for modern testing, this contemporary exploratory testing. And especially for granularity, you would definitely want your tests to be in the smallest possible scale, but you have different shapes, different scales of testing. So as slow as possible, but on all different levels. So also with the actual integrated system, exactly as your users would experience them. Ways of maybe using the real interaction sometimes having complete control over the data by using some kind of interjection of data into the exact place where you would want to. So again, the whole team working together, you can ask for things that would make your testing easier. I'd like to be able to do this. I've never been able to. And we can change the architectures also to allow us to test those kind of things. And definitely looking at various perspectives, not just functionality, but also the reliability, long-term functionality, the performance aspects, kind of how does it use resources, usability aspects, security aspects. You can continue the list of functional, non-functional, or parafunctional qualities that you would look at. So kind of putting all of this information together is what you would expect in a modern team. So how does that then work? The modern coaching-oriented test management, I think it works starting from this essential understanding that whenever you have a release, it's creating a known good baseline, a new good known baseline, meaning you did all of the testing to be able to say that this is now okay, we're going to be ready to put it in production, and you have used your kind of like, full imagination of making sure that the thing will work well enough. And when you have done that once, putting something in production, if you take only small steps, very small steps from the known good baseline, if those steps are tiny, you can look at the step, it actually does fit in your head. You can think about it, you can have better conversations about that change. And if there's side effect symptoms that you're uncertain about, you can probably revert the change a lot easier when it's small, rather than something that has been kind of like accumulated over multiple months. So modern test management really relies on frequent to continuous releases. And this is the journey that I have been now doing in Vaisala for about 10, 12 teams for the last 3 years, moving from once or twice a year releases to once a week releases, once a month releases, or at least once a quarter releases, depending a little bit on the team. But these bi-weekly, once every 2 weeks, these releases are what I generally think is a good training cadence for learning to think in terms of we open the build, the known good baseline, we make some changes, we again make sure that it's okay, that it's again a good baseline, and then we continue the work. So it's a risk management technique, not only the release management or the frequent releases, not only test management technique, but it's definitely changing the way we do testing. The change comes then to the reliance on test automation. So even if we have large numbers of those test automation cases, they don't really take so much of our effort. Maybe 10% of our effort into testing on every single iteration goes into keeping the programmatic tests green. Like, you make your changes, you react to the red. It's kind of like a continuous process, but 90% actually goes into growing that set of assets, exploring for things that are new combinations, things that you maybe needed more time to understand or know. So you find new information or bugs, and you grow your testing assets based on it, and you might also then create new programmatic tests. And if you have tests out of that, large number of test cases that you have automated that keep failing, or end up failing at some point, they're all kind of like an invitation to just go and explore some more. So you want to understand maybe how you have implemented your tests in a way that isn't really very reliable. Maybe you will learn how to create, that's definitely something we did learn, how to create more reliable tests, how to untangle some of the dependencies in the application that makes those tests flaky. And sometimes the invitation to explore is actually telling you that you did introduce problems that you didn't intend to. And at least for us, that's been the main value is, well, both unintentional problems, but also bad communication, us forgetting to tell about the side effects to the others. Seeing tests change is a great way of communicating within the team what expectations are changing. So there's been definite value on that side. So starting from continuous releases, investing continuously into tests, another principle or general observation that we have had is this idea of, which comes from exploratory testing thinking, that you are supposed to find ways of managing that maintain agency. Agency is this idea that individuals can act independently and make their own free choices. And agency generally means inaction in testing in particular. It means that whoever has an idea of a new test also has control over its implementation, or at least you don't create a test case that someone else will take and will then automate, but you will get to pair up on kind of like maintaining that agency. So there's also this continuous learning activity with regards to having multiple people coming to the same problems, but maintaining full pictures, not separating actions that should not be separated, has been a core aspect. And then the fourth principle for us has been to realize that we no longer have test managers. Actually, product owners tend to now be the new test managers with the continuous releases. So asking for a particular change, they also are asking for the right kind of testing or sufficient testing to assess the risks from that baseline that we talked about. So definitely the redistribution of power, who makes what kind of decisions, has been part of this modern coaching thing. So for me, being the tester in the team, starting from this idea that, well, the product owner is now the test manager, what do I then do? I usually found myself being the coaching tester even before I became the manager of the team. I was working very closely with the product owners, identifying gaps, kind of like suggesting things that the product owner should be asking from the team. So even if it's now the product owner who is the test manager, maybe they need some coaching to actually operate in that new role in their full capability. And that's something that I found myself doing when coaching into this new style of testing. So it's not just developers who need to learn testing. It's actually a lot more management who needs to learn to make space and to ask for the right kind of testing. I've been working then with the developers, with the teams, making the skills available at the right time. So again, if you're on a very low skill level, you first learn the basics and then you kind of continuously raise the level. I think there's still many different levels that we can get to, even though we're doing quite well after a year. Looking at data, showing people that, hey, maybe there's something here to pay attention to. So data deep dives, looking at numbers, that type of things, kind of like starting conversations on what does this say to us? This is, interesting, has been a major part of the work that I've been doing when I've been coaching. And then generally just kind of like making sure that test design and test execution are not, one person's job and the other person's job. But if they are supposed to be kept together, it also means that we're going to be pairing a lot more in our team. So nowadays we do both pair programming and ensemble programming, pair testing and ensemble testing in my team. And all of this kind of like while navigating the traditional corporate documentation requirements, where actually the 13 or 14 test charters, the manual test cases, the minimum number that we needed to create, has been the way that we have been able to then navigate the required created documentation. That together with the automation is a sufficient way of delivering documentation and status information, at least in our processes, which are a little bit documentation heavy in some ways. And then finally, practices. What does it mean then to practices that we have ended up with in our teams? Well, we talked already about frequent deliveries. We talked a little bit already about this idea of kind of like the baseline and the change, and then following that change, making sure that things are in a good state there. Then automation is something that is nobody's own baby, but it's everyone's shared growth effort. The bug reports, we don't write them. We have a conversation of them, and we write them down as code that fixes them. So that's a principle taken into a practice. We do a lot of pair and ensemble testing and programming, as we talked about already. And when we need to remember the features, we can create documentation that lists all the features that we say we support. But a lot of this stuff, if we rather put it in a form of automation and just can read it out from there, we have found that that's the modern equivalent of how we would do this. So to kind of conclude, contemporary exploratory testing, this style of testing that we've been talking about, it is sort of looking at putting your own efforts as a tester into this matrix, where on one axis you have the work that is either productive, you are doing some work that is of value, or generative, you are helping others do work that is of value for the other people, but your work is making them better. And it could be either available immediately, kind of short term, those results, or it could be that they are available in the long term. And in the productive corner, you still kind of like, need to spend time with the application, test it, kind of like figure out different routes to reveal all of that important information to you, but then capture notes in test automation. Then on the generative side, even when you're gone, the automation stays behind to do some of the work if you have captured things there. And this is something that I have definitely not done right always in my previous career steps. I've been enjoying the traditional exploratory testing a little bit too much to see that contemporary exploratory testing, where automation is part of that exploration strategy, is what we really need. And then on the long term, productive things, if you become better tester, that is a worthwhile investment. So you learning to work better with others is a worthwhile investment. And that then helps on the generative side, to improve everyone's skills. So this is kind of what I wanted to share today on coaching for modern test management.